My friends, the more deeply one enters the country of self-forgetting, the more curious becomes the discovery awaiting him, that nature assigns to every soul a radius of influence, silent yet immense, which grows only when the self grows small. For the world is governed not by those who strain and shout, but by those who are transparent conduits for a higher wind. A man thinks he must persuade, argue, defend, and compel, yet all this is merely the labor of a frightened ego trying to secure its place. True power is never noisy. It emanates as fragrance, emanates from a flower, without intention, without posture, without ownership. If a man stands empty of himself, heaven rushes to inhabit him, and the world feels his presence though he speaks not a word. Indeed, I have often said, what you are thunders so loudly, I cannot hear what you say. And in the forgetting of oneself, one becomes this thunder, quiet but unmistakable. The paradox deepens. The less you seek to affect the world, the more profoundly the world is affected by you. Not because you exert influence, but because you have ceased to obstruct the influence of the deeper life that flows through all things. Thus, the soul that has abandoned the burden of self becomes as a clear glass through which the sun may shine unbroken. But let us turn now to an even more extraordinary revelation: the discovery that self-forgetting enlarges one's sense of time. For the ego is a creature of hours, minutes, and urgencies. It is always late, always grasping, always fearful of loss. Yet the soul is a citizen of eternity, untroubled by clocks or deadlines. When the self falls away, time ceases to be a tyrant and becomes merely a gentle river in which you float. Moments lengthen. Colors deepen. The sound of the wind acquires a richness you had never noticed. The present expands into something like a cathedral, where every footstep echoes toward eternity. Life becomes less of a race and more of a revelation. I have watched men rush through their days as though chased by invisible hounds. I have seen them hurl themselves into work and pleasure with a desperation born of forgetfulness. Forgetfulness not of the self, but of the soul. For the man who forgets his soul remembers only his fear. Yet the man who forgets himself remembers everything else: the grass, the stars, the laughter of children, the frailty of old age, the mystery of existence. And in that remembrance, he enters the timeless. Here, in this vast chamber of the eternal present, creativity blossoms of its own accord. For a mind free of self is a mind free to receive. Ideas do not come as visitors to the ego, but as citizens returning home to the open, spacious mind. I have seen poets strain for inspiration, artists torture themselves for originality, thinkers clutch at intelligence as though it were a trophy. But the finest works of mind and hand arise only when the maker disappears. The poem writes itself. The painting paints itself. The insight descends like a swallow alighting on a branch. Not effort, but surrender is the mark of true genius. And so, my friends, the path of self-forgetting is not the desert of personality, but the blooming garden of the soul. It is not an escape from life, but a grand entrance into it. The ego would have you believe you are losing something. The soul knows you are gaining all. Yet there is still another frontier we must explore, one that every mortal will eventually encounter, though few dare to contemplate it until the final hour. I speak of death. Most fear death because they mistake themselves for the self, this fragile bundle of memories, preferences, and anxieties. But the man who has practiced forgetting the self finds in the approach of death not terror, but recognition. The ego dies daily in him. Thus he has rehearsed the great departure countless times. To such a soul, death is not an executioner, but a valet, opening the door, inviting him into a room he has visited often, in dreams, meditations, and silences. He does not cling to the past, for he has learned to hold lightly what was never his. He does not tremble for the future, for he has lived many hours in the timeless, and he does not fear the dissolution of the self, for he has already tasted the joy that arises when the self is gone. Do not misunderstand me. I do not claim that death is sweet or easy, but that it becomes familiar to the self-forgotten soul. It is a natural movement, like the falling of an autumn leaf to join the forest floor. Life cycles through forms. Consciousness rearranges its garments, yet the light behind all forms, the witness behind all consciousness, remains untouched. He who knows himself only as the self fears death absolutely. He who knows himself as the soul fears death lightly. He who knows himself as the infinite does not fear death at all. Thus, the practice of self-forgetting prepares one not merely for life, but for the passage beyond it. Let us turn now to practical counsel. How does one cultivate this noble art of diminishing the self without diminishing one's vitality, joy, or individuality? Begin with silence. Sit each day for a few minutes without entertainment, without speech, without even the desire to accomplish. Let the air breathe you. Let your thoughts do as they please, without interference or judgment. Eventually, you will notice a presence behind the thoughts, a spacious watcher who remains untouched by their storms. This watcher is not the ego, it is the soul. Learn to abide in it. Then practice small acts of invisible goodness. Help without announcing. Give without expecting. Let your kindness be like a shadow, following you without your attention. In these moments, the self loses its importance, and the soul steps to the front. Finally, walk often in nature. The trees do not remember themselves. The rivers do not assert themselves. The mountains do not congratulate themselves. Yet each fulfills its nature with quiet grandeur. Stand among them and imitate their forgetfulness. In time, the self will loosen its fingers from your heart, and you will live not merely as a person, but as a participant in the great symphony of existence. Your life will become not an argument, but an atmosphere, not a performance, but a presence. And the world, feeling this presence, will breathe easier. For the rarest gift you can offer humanity is not your brilliance, your beauty, or your strength, but the spacious, luminous stillness of a self-forgotten,